I've talked before about the cunning nemesis of rationality, that part of you that sees good arguments against what you're saying coming and understands that they're some kind of threat to you and comes up with a frantic rationalization to try and futilely make it go away. And a very common manifestation of that is people saying something that implies that the burden of proof is on the other party, as if that's just something that you can declare, as if that's something that you can choose, and you can't. The burden of proof lies on the person making the positive claim, or the person making an extraordinary claim, or on the person who has given the poorest reasons, if there's like indications in both directions. You don't just get to choose your opinion, your argument as the one that's automatically correct, and just reword things or reframe things so that the other person has to prove you wrong. Either it was that way around or it wasn't. You don't choose. It's incredibly, deeply arrogant to think that you can choose. It's basically saying that you're so special that rules of logic and evidence just invert themselves to your convenience, or that without having done any of the due diligence, you must be right. And it's silly. And you should be embarrassed if you realize you've done this. So if you care about the truth and aren't going to let your ego get in the way of pursuing it, watch yourself and see whether you do this. See whether you have this tactic of just demanding that the other person prove something when it's actually you who's making a claim that needs to be proven. Or if they've given reasons and you've just ignored them and then you've demanded reasons. If you find yourself saying something like, I consider it to be self-evident that such and such is true. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't things like that, but you better check and make sure that the thing that you're saying is something that can be put in that category. If you're in a debate about it, there is a good chance that the other person has shown that there are more fundamental ways of slicing the thinking on the topic that makes your claim not something that can just be taken in and of itself. And you see this all the time in religious arguments. It's got to be page 1 or 2 of the playbook. But even in conversations where, say someone's made a generalization about some group or another, and you express disbelief at the generalization, and the person asks you to prove that all the members of the group don't meet this criteria or something like that, it's a kind of defensive thing where they have an unjustified belief and they don't want to admit that it's unjustified and that they don't have a good reason for it. So they'll ask you to prove it. Or perhaps they do have evidence, but just not quite enough evidence for the claim they're making. So maybe it's very weak evidence for the claim they're making, and maybe they should be making a claim that's less presumptuous. Just watch for it if you care about this kind of thing.